Welcome to the White Mountains Sunday broadcast here in Arizona and those who are joining online. Today I'm going to be sharing the Tibetan's teachings on glamour and illusion. This is a very interesting subject. The two words glamour and illusion are terms that we read throughout the teaching. And still, it's not so easy to understand. So hopefully today, what I'm going to share with you will be a step toward better understanding. The Tibetan sage says, glamour is the powerful enemy of all who tread the path of discipleship. He also says, it is such a subtle thing that it ever masquerades as the truth. It is powerful because it finds its point of entry into a disciple's consciousness through those states of mind and those habits of thought which are so familiar that their appearance is automatic and constitutes an almost unconscious manifestation. So basically what he's talking about with glamours is that they have become so much a part of our personality life that we don't recognize that these are expressions of glamour that are manifesting through the way we live our life, the way we think, the way we speak, the way we act. He gives several indications of certain common glamours, which are self-pity. Self-pity is one of them. The spirit of criticism is another common glamour, and the other is suspicion. It's very curious. Self-pity, a spirit of criticism, and suspicion. Regarding the garden of glamour, he indicates that there are certain things which make for right conditions to breed glamour. Glamour can always be found where there exists criticism. When careful analysis would show that no criticism is really warranted. So there is a statement that we can ask ourselves when we find ourselves instinctively, automatically criticizing other people, criticizing concepts, criticizing religions, and so forth. We want to ask ourselves, is this criticism that we are expressing really warranted? So that's a way we can begin to observe ourselves, is just by challenging what it is that we are criticizing. The next is, in criticism, we're not taking any personal responsibility. By that I mean where it is not the place or the duty of the person to criticize. That's such a powerful statement. And when I came across this in the Tibetan's teachings, I ran out of fingers on my hands when I listened to people who are criticizing, but it's not their place. You know, they're not in a position to criticize. So that's a glamour. Pride. Pride in achievement or satisfaction that one is a disciple. Now, isn't that odd? When you're really practicing the teaching, when you are practicing humility, you will never even consider or think that, wow, I'm a disciple. Another way to prevent us from even having such thinking is by having a teacher. It doesn't even have to be a spiritual teacher, because in discipleship, most of us are born into discipleship. That first conscious step that we take when we're maybe age 3 or 4 is a step back onto the path of discipleship. So when we think about, when a thought comes to us, wow, look at, I'm a disciple, then you're not. You're just not. And there is one exception to that, and that is when you don't have a teacher, but yet you are a disciple. But I was thinking, when I was a young girl, all the way up through about the end of the 1900s. Oh, it seems like the ancient past. But I had teachers in my face every single day. And they kept reminding me how I had not accomplished anything close to what my purpose was. I was working toward it, but keep striving, better yourself, improve yourself. You can do this better, you can do that better. Why are you doing that? Why are you saying these things? Why is your behavior like that? And so forth. And then I would meet them in my dreams. So all these experiences certainly taught the value of humility. So that's the exception. You can be a disciple without a teacher and fall into the trap of thinking, like, well, I'm a disciple. See if I can mess up the microphone there. Got a new mic, can you see it? Isn't it cute? It looks like a little puppy dog because it's got fur on it. Anyway, so any sense of superiority is a glamour. Essentially, desires formed from astral substance become desires. Desires formed from astral substance become glamours. As a person's desires become more consistent by building upon themselves and increasing in power, the desire then becomes a glamour. Once a glamour forms itself in your astral body, you put yourself in the danger of obsession. This means that often and even unknowingly, a glamour or several glamours will begin to control your thinking, your emotions, and even your actions. And they begin to serve as a point of reference that becomes the underlying influence of your decisions. That's how powerful these glamours are. They interfere with clear and conscious thinking. They circumvent expansion of your consciousness. And they interfere with your reasoning and logic. So when we listen to the political hysteria of comments, certainly in this country's, as we come so close to nominating and voting for our next president, and we hear such insane comments and listen to conspiracy theories that are just, bouncing off the walls, and we wonder why, because these are thinking people. And yet they're making these convoluted comments that defy reason and logic. It is because the control of glamours that are functioning through their thinking, their emotions, and their actions. Most glamours are related to our three lower centers: the base of the spine, the sacral center, and the solar plexus. The base of the spine, for example, when a glamour nourishes our base of spine center, we become a person who desires power. And that desire increases itself until we become a domineering or dominating kind of personality. That's when we know that the base of the spine center is actively being controlled by a glamour. The desire for power. The sacral center. A glamour that is related to the sacral center will increase your desire for sex and physical contact. A person who is controlled by glamours related to the sacral center will behave in ways that will act and attract unhealthy sexual experiences. Such people would dress in certain ways that draw attention to their desire for sex. The tone of their voice will be suggestive of their desire. Certain body movements will demonstrate their desires, and so forth. As this glamour increases, they become obsessed with their desire for sex and eventually qualify their desires with uncanny justifications. A glamour related to the solar plexus center will increase your behaviors. Those behaviors that frequently involve slander and malice, belittling, criticism, and treason. These glamours and people will enjoy going to battle with others, whether it is a physical fight or a verbal argument, a verbal attack. This is why it takes a skilled psychologist, therapist, leader, teacher to know how to counteract those who are verbally attacking. They can verbally attack a country, or they can verbally attack you, depending on the strength, of the power of that glamour and the position that the person holds. As glamours begin to control your life, they will take over and manipulate your life according to, listen to this, according to the objective of the glamour, such as wanting to control another person's thinking. They'll even control your own thinking, your own style of communication and speech, your emotional nature, and your physical actions. So that's glamour, the 101 of glamour, let's call it, now illusion. The Tibetan sage gives us some valuable instruction regarding the subject of illusion. He says, and I quote, "It is the soul itself which dispels illusion through the use of the faculty of your intuition." He also indicates that it is our illumined mind which will dissipate in a glamour. It's our illumined mind. He also says illusion is primarily concerned with the reaction of the mind to an unfolding revelation or idea or even an inspiration. So illusion is a failure of our mind to correctly register interpret, or translate the revelation that has been transmitted to you. And it is consequently a sin, if you care for that word, of the intelligent and highly developed people, including disciples. Of those who stand on the path of accepted discipleship as they seek to expand their consciousness in response to soul contact. So this is why there are several books and several parts and sections of other books that talk to us about glamour and illusions and how dangerous they are. So even though you're an advanced disciple, let's say, and you are in contact with the higher ashrams, you're in contact with senior initiates or senior disciples and receive inspiration from them, or you attend interplane classes, and in those classes you learn new aspects of the plan. And this plan, these new aspects, one of them comes to you directly, and you begin to interpret that plan and then try to understand it and unfold it and bring it into manifestation. If you have controlling glamours, you can misunderstand and thus misappropriate the purpose underlying that inspiration. We are told that illusion is based upon the thought form building activity of the lower mind. Illusion is based upon the thought form building activity of the lower mind. An illusion can turn into a glamour. When it does this, it will have a great power over your thinking and your decisions. It causes rejection and failure, obsession, and even to the extreme, possession. When a person's mind attracts revelations, higher impressions, or ideas, and their soul is focused in the lower mind, or finds themselves functioning between the lower and higher mind, the revelations become mistranslated in the lower mind. And this mistranslation then is the illusion. It is the distortion of an idea. And so the manifestation, the form given to that idea fails or causes horrendous disruption on the planet. Revelations, higher guidance, and impressions are void of distorted interpretation only if you can clearly translate and understand the idea. The influence of illusion teaches you how to cultivate the power of discrimination. It teaches us how to cultivate the powers of discrimination. It is a test and influence of illusion that finds all disciples with the need to learn four things. The first is the power of self-observation. We need to learn the power, experience the power of self-observation. We need to control the lower mind and build a bridge to consciously function in our higher mind. This, of course, is done through meditation and service. The third is conscious thinking. And the fourth is responsibility for thoughts. Our own thoughts and others. The thoughts of others. So illusion can be understood to signify the reaction of the undisciplined mind, the reaction of the undisciplined mind, can be understood as illusion. The moment a person takes control of their physical, emotional, and mental bodies, creating a unity, then this puts their lower nature in touch with the higher nature. So we're talking about basically integration and alignment. Once we integrate the physical, emotional, and mental bodies, and plus aligning them to the light of the higher mind, now, bless you, we are in control. We will be in control of any weaknesses and misinterpretation of ideas because of illusion. After our soul, our human soul, through conscious striving, meditation, and purification, create a cohesive unit out of the personality, now our solar angel begins to illuminate the higher mind. Once our soul, through conscious striving, meditation, and purification, creates a cohesive unit out of our personality life, then the solar angel begins to illumine our higher mental body. The first step of a disciple's training is to cultivate through discrimination, key word, discrimination, the ability to recognize the kernel of unpolluted truth. Once we learn and develop the ability to recognize the kernel of unpolluted truth in any presentation of truth in which they may become confronted, this is so valuable to us. It will prevent us from being candidates to agree with conspiracy theories, from being victims of conspiracy theories. We have to recognize the unpolluted kernel of truth. For example, slander. When you hear slander being directed toward another person, a story that most will understand as absolute truth, your task is going to be able to recognize the unpolluted kernel of truth from which that distortion has been born. The media is an expert at taking a kernel of truth and contaminating it. The second step of a disciple's training is to understand how illusion is created. It is only the highly developed person who is going to have mental illusions intruding in their thinking. The mental illusion, according to the Tibetan, is built around a definite intuition. I think I need to repeat that. It is only in the highly developed person who will have mental illusions intruding on their thinking. The mental illusion, according to the Tibetan, is built around a definite intuition. And this intuition is concretized by the mind until its appearance is so real that the person believes that they see so clearly that which should be done and given to the world that they spend their time endeavoring in fanatical or obsessive manners to make others see it the same way. It is for this reason especially that disciples need the guidance of an earthly teacher. Once the highly developed person becomes influenced by illusion, their life slips away on the wings of illusion, and their incarnation is relatively a profitless one. It's a pretty dramatic statement, isn't it? When a disciple's mind becomes controlled by illusion, it takes the nerves of steel of their earthly teacher to help them recognize their illusions. And when you think about why, why, if this individual is advanced, is an advanced disciple, has a brilliant mind, is intuitive, is intelligent, why do these things happen? And it almost defies, our idealism of when we think of, oh, that person is great, that person is advanced, that person is in the teaching, that person is a disciple. And we see the teacher coming over, that earthly teacher coming over to our brilliant friend and knocking them down. Know that behind that action, an illusion has grabbed the consciousness of that disciple. And because of the power that the disciple now has, they can influence thousands wrongly. So that's why we need an earthly teacher. When a disciple mind becomes controlled by illusion, like I said, it takes the nerves of steel of their earthly teacher to help them recognize their illusions. The catch-22 of information is that normally it is the highly developed person who believes that they know more than their teacher, if they have one. In fact, such a person will be the first to say that no one really any longer needs an earthly teacher. Or in their blind thinking, they will listen to the words of their teacher, but be unable to apply the hints, the suggestions, and sometimes even direct messages being given to them. I remember one day a friend of mine told me that their teacher had given them a suggestion and how they didn't have to follow it. I said, you are so blind. You are so blind. If you have a teacher and that teacher is singling you out and considering you important enough to give a suggestion, it doesn't mean take it or leave it. It means to look more deeply into the reason underlying that suggestion. If this occurs, however, the teacher often steps back into the shadows of the student's illusions, leaving the student to their own desires. The Tibetan gives us 7 major ways of illusion. The way of wrong perception, the way of wrong interpretation, the way of wrong appropriation, the way of wrong direction, the way of wrong integration, the way of wrong embodiment, and the way of wrong application. Wrong perception of an idea. What does this mean? The disciple cannot distinguish between an idea and ideal, between an idea and a thought form, or between an intuitive and a mental concept which produces illusion. So for example, many of our thoughts are built around an idea. Some of these ideas are very ancient ideals that have been discarded but still persist as thought forms. Some are entirely new but not yet potent. Many are the shells of long exploded concepts. The challenge is to learn how to distinguish between the real and unreal, between the old and new forms, between those created by humanity and those of hierarchy. As we consider the elements of illusion, we can easily recognize the difficulties which illusion creates. For example, present-day church dogma, also world economy. Number 2, the way of wrong interpretation. Wrong interpretation is where one sees through a distorted lens. That makes sense. Wrong interpretation. We see things through a distorted lens. Thus, we have conspiracy theories. This is a distortion that is caused by seeing things with a partial view. The cause of wrong perception is due to inadequate mental equipment. People are unable, as a result, to think clearly. Their illusion leads to misinterpretation. It has to do with, first and foremost, pride, and secondly, self-interest. Number 3, the way of wrong appropriation. Let's say the wrong appropriation of an ideal. Once a person creates an understanding of an idea or an ideal, then they're going to formulate their perception, give themselves the credit, and thus giving undue importance to their idea. They then build their life around their idea and expect others to recognize their ownership of the idea. This is pure distortion. For truly, if a person is given an idea from the plane of intuition, the idea is presented to the person by the hierarchy in some fashion or other. It is their responsibility to serve the idea by putting it into as pure a form as possible, and then to take responsibility for the application of the idea with all humility. Number 4, the way of wrong direction of ideas. The cause of this stems from the disciple having as of yet a small, non-inclusive mind. As the disciple strives to incorporate the virtues of humility, unity, and sacrificial service, then they will begin to expand their consciousness and include the more significant idea. They'll recognize, in other words, that they are seeing only one aspect of an idea. And this is so true with the teaching, that will take an advanced, intelligent, knowledgeable person who has read one book, of which several books have been written on that idea, and now they can only see one, corner of the whole magnificent flower of an idea, and then it becomes distorted, and then they distort the teaching. This is why we don't want to teach until we have unfolded all the petals of that idea from the teaching. So what occurs is that the person begins to apply the idea in a very distorted manner, which ultimately leads to failure. Such failure is often the result of the person's desire for power, for controlling They have a controlling pride. People with power, they have that base of the spine, influence of glamour, they have such a strong desire for power, and that power comes from pride, controlling pride. And we often see this in the behaviors of leaders. The fifth is the way of wrong integration of an idea. We know the fact that every disciple has a life purpose, a life plan which takes place in a particular area of service. If the person is not engaged in a particular area of service, then they are not considered yet a disciple. For example, one field of service would be education. Others could be the field of psychology, communication, healing, or the arts, and so on. Your service may be within a small radius, such as your home, or your community, or even a larger field, such as at a national or international level. Eventually, through your thinking, the thinking of the higher mind, by way of contact with another disciple, you will come upon an idea of importance. An idea of importance. Integrating the idea into your life plan. See, that when we make contact with other disciples, hopefully disciples more advanced than ourselves, then we begin to receive revelatory ideas. And that revelatory idea is being carried in a vision of that more advanced disciple, a vision of which that advanced disciple needs co-workers. So this is why we want to make contact with advancing disciples. Then we integrate the idea into our life plan, which means placing the idea in our life in the way that the threads of a cloth are woven together to create a whole. The idea, which is part of your life purpose, is the root cause of all your actions, emotions, and thinking. It reminds me of the relationship a disciple has with the master. The love, the beauty, the wisdom, and radiance is part of a disciple's life, of all that they do. So the master is not out there, but part of their heart. Here's a warning. It may be that after a while, it may not seem important or pertinent to your life, and it is, after all, of no definite use to you. This is what happens when you stop working on yourself. This is what happens when you stop practicing the virtues. This is what happens when you no longer incorporate all the many qualities that we read about in the teaching into our day-to-day life. We lose our enthusiasm, we lose our contact with the higher ashram and with senior disciples, and then so on and so forth, and our vanity and ego takes over, and soon that initial beautiful, magnificent idea is of no use to us. Pitiful. But it happens. So there are two ways for this, the two reasons for this. Number one, you are blinded by your glamours and illusions, your sense of self-importance, your pride or vanity. And two, the idea you latched upon was actually not for yourself. The Tibetan explains that many good disciples demonstrate an overactive, over-fertile mind and arrive at no good, constructive, objective, or life activity. They seize upon every idea that comes upon their way, say, it's my idea, and use no discrimination of any kind. I recall many years ago giving an assignment to a particular class of students. The assignment was to keep a journal of their ideas, inspired ideas, creative ideas, then determining if the idea was for their own use or for that of one of their co-workers. Of course, one must first have a consciousness that works in the higher mind to be effective. It was an important exercise from which many discoveries were made. For example, we discovered that not all ideas given are those ideas which every disciple should work. If they do, what's going to be the effect? It will be failure. They impose an idea into their lives, one that they think they are unable to manifest, and they do not have the ability to acquire the skills to skillfully bring the idea into a successful form. Or they are not temperamentally suited to participate in the idea. And the result is, like I said, failure. The cause is rooted in one's ego and selfish nature. For the disciple is englamored by the idea of their own selfless interest, selfish interest. The remedy is, of course, humility. Number 6, the way of wrong embodiment. This error is normally found only with initiates of a high degree and relates to those whose development as a soul touches the sphere of intuition and where they can perceive great spiritual ideas. This person is then charged with the embodiment of the idea. This idea is contacted but wrongly clothed and thus wrongly initiated into the world of form, into objectivity. And the last one, number 7, the way of wrong application of ideas. The Tibetan makes an explanation regarding this illusion. He says, how often does this form of illusion descend upon a disciple? He contacts an idea intuitively and also intelligently, and yet then misapplies it. Here's a story. One day a student typed a letter for his teacher. When he took the letter to him, the teacher read it, and then he ripped it up. And the student said, well, why did you do that? Well, he said, I feel that the man who is going to read this letter has changed his heart. The letter will not have a new message for him, and besides, it's going to aggravate him. The point being, an untimely letter can create negative reactions. Another time, the teacher had a student retype a letter 3 or 4 times because he kept changing one word that he was not satisfied with. The student remembered his teacher told him that one must always try to send pure and clear ideas in order not to mislead the reader and create false impressions. I want him to read exactly what I feel, the teacher added. So what is the cause for wrong application? At times it has to do with the present age of humanity and the plan that the hierarchy is engaged in at any one cycle of time or according to the general trend of the thoughts of mankind. A disciple is easily drawn into wrong action and application of an idea because of a general illusion. An illusion which is the result of wrong perception, wrong interpretation, wrong appropriation, wrong direction, wrong integration, and wrong embodiment. So today's talk is simply a simple overview to help us understand the power of glamours, the power that glamours and illusions have over us. We must strive to practice the power of self-observation, control our lower mind, and build that antakarana bridge to function at that first stage of the antakarana bridge, which allows us to function in our higher mind and to begin to think consciously and to take responsibility for our thoughts. So that's just a little peek into glamour and illusion. We haven't even touched Maya. So powerful. Thank you for listening.